Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Kelly. I'm the Community Relations Program host at the Rochester Hills Public Library, and I would like to welcome you to this evening's presentation, Fight Cancer, Heart Disease, and Diabetes with Your Fork, with Dr. Sruti March, correct?
Sruti March, yeah. It was a really good, honest attempt.
Thank you. We would like to thank the Friends of the Rochester Hills Public Library for supporting our programs with their many fundraising efforts. We greatly appreciate their support. You can register for our upcoming programs by visiting calendar.rhpl.org. Join us here on Zoom on Thursday, October 8th at 7 p.m. when we host, is that a Thursday? Yes, it's 7 p.m. when we host an author and sports journalist Greg Frank, who will discuss his book, Epic Confrontation, Canada versus Russia on Ice. Tonight, attendees will remain muted throughout the program, although we both encourage you to ask any questions through the chat feature here. I'm sure we'll both try and keep an eye on that, and I'm sure Dr. March here will be answering questions to the best of her ability during the presentation. And this program will be recorded and available to view on the library's YouTube channel about 1 week from this evening. This evening, Dr. March will discuss how to create a healthy plate and a lifestyle that works for you. Dr. March specializes in oncology nutrition and sees patients before, during, and after cancer treatment. Many patients also have or develop heart disease and diabetes. Eating for the prevention of cancer, heart disease, and diabetes is based on the same key principles. So please welcome Dr. March.
Thank you, Joe. Before I jump in here, tell me how much time I have.
I will double check. I believe we are scheduled until, go back here. We're scheduled till 9 p.m. So pretty much any time.
I know, I saw some jaws drop open. Don't worry, I'm not going to keep you here till 9 o'clock. But okay, thank you. So basically,
more just don't feel rushed on a deadline.
Yeah, it's totally fine. All right, so I wanted to introduce myself. Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you to the library, who I absolutely love and adore. Wanted to support them, which is why I'm speaking here today. I want to talk a little bit about who I am, what I do, and how I can help you today. Okay. Joe mentioned I'm a natural medicine doctor, but a fancy kind. So what that means is that I have both the training in conventional medicine along with the training in nutrition and natural therapies. Okay. So he mentioned, if you're listening, that I do a lot of work with the cancer population. And I know many of you don't have cancer, never want cancer, but there is a very big link between the type of foods to eat to avoid heart disease, the type of foods to eat to avoid diabetes, and the type of foods to eat to avoid cancer, right? So there's a huge amount of overlap there. And thank goodness, because what kills us in this country is still number one, is still heart disease, followed by cancer, right? So it's nice to know that there are things that we can do that hit all three birds with one stone. I want to talk a little bit about my education so that you're kind of comfortable with what I'm saying. I went to a 4-year medical school where we did anatomy, physiology, just like, cadaver studies, just like a regular medical school. The difference is that at the last 2 years, we learn botanical medicine. We learn a whole year of nutrition. We have a whole year of health behavioral counseling, because I'm trained like an old school family practice doc that can, catch babies, write prescriptions for like a UTI, any of those things. But I like to use mostly natural therapies as much as possible. So Michigan doesn't license natural medicine doctors. So you can call yourself a doctor of love, a doctor of anything you want, and there's no license here. So therefore, I maintain my license in the state of Maine. That's just so that I can do continuing education, so I make sure I'm sharp. And there I can write prescriptions for, like I said, UTI, like, if you had a UTI, some sort of infection, or do really minor surgery, right? You stub your toe, something happens and you need to take it out, I'm the person to come to for something like that. In the state of Michigan, I act as a consultant to you, okay? It just means that I can tell you whatever I want, which is awesome. Good. So I got a good kind of a gauge for what you guys we're interested in. It sounds like you have mostly questions about heart disease, some questions about triglycerides, and I want to touch on some of them. But before I do, I want to know, do you guys have any questions about me, about my education, or how I've trained? I see some people typing, so I'm sure somebody says, great, Christine, hit me with your questions. Oh, I see my neighbor. Hi. What school did I graduate from and where? Yeah, so I have an undergraduate degree in bioengineering from the biggest school you've never heard of. It's called the University of California, San Diego. I'm a California gal who transplanted to Michigan, blame my husband and the snow. And I did my medical schooling in Bastyr, B-A-S-T-Y-R University. There's only 6 licensed natural medicine schools in the whole nation. So I went to, in my opinion, the Harvard of them. So I graduated from the San Diego location. Yeah. Anybody else? I'm going to let those questions flow in because the silence is just a good space for me to keep talking. Okay. All right. So if nobody has any further questions that's burning about me or what I do or, how I got from California to here, then what I'm going to do is start by explaining the one commonality between diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. Okay. So how many of you have heard of inflammation? So inflammation, yeah. So I see a bunch of hands going up. That's great. Yeah. So inflammation has kind of gotten a bad rap lately, right? So we don't really understand inflammation, but we know it's bad, right? That's what everybody tells me. They're like, I don't want to be inflamed. So the easiest way to think of inflammation is to think of it like when you get a cut, okay? So when we get a cut, you have a red, hot, angry looking cut, right? So those are the characteristics of inflammation. You get a raise in temperature, right? You get your finger is trying to fix it. So there's a little bit of little cell signals that are happening down there. And if you keep touching the area, you stay inflamed. Okay, so here's a true or false question. Inflammation is bad, true or false? Can you put in the chat box, true or false? Inflammation is bad, true or false? Just write T for true, F for false. False. Perfect, true. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna let you guys just type in TRF here. True. Okay. So I feel like it's 50-50 right now. So inflammation is not a bad thing for us because that is what we need to actually heal that cut. Okay. So inflammation is actually our body's response to fixing something. Okay. But it's kind of a trick question, right? Because chronic inflammation, or inflammation that keeps being there, okay, that is bad for us, okay? So it's like having that cut and constantly having that achy, throbby, raise in temperature with all that chemical debris, and then we keep cutting it or we keep injuring it. Like, those cracks you get on the tip of your knuckle, it's just like owie all the time, right? You keep like injuring it and you're like, oh, it hurts and it takes forever to heal, okay? We want a little bit of inflammation to heal when we have an acute injury, but when something is chronic, like in our arteries of our heart and the arteries elsewhere in our body, that is called chronic inflammation, and that can lead to very bad things, right? So how how does that affect? So let's start with heart disease. How does chronic inflammation affect heart disease? And this will kind of answer some of these questions about cholesterol, et cetera. Oh, can I not draw? Is there a whiteboard feature? Because I was really hoping to draw.
Sure that there is whiteboard feature on
Usually
Zoom.
just under screen. Sometimes you might have had to click it. Do you remember clicking and saying not the case?
I unfortunately don't see
Oh, no.
anything.
All right.
You could, if you
good with me using my hands, but we'll make it work.
If you do have a whiteboard program on your computer, you could be able to screen share from that.
Yeah, okay. But I don't know how to draw on something like that. I don't want to
I understand.
attempt that. Let me see if I just grab a piece of paper. Hold on.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. In the meantime, you guys can feel free to keep asking some questions. I'm sure later on we'll either get around to asking a few of them more directly, or we'll know what kind of things we want to address. She wants to address a little more during the program.
I'm going to have to draw it on here and then show it to you guys because I can't draw this way, right? So I want you to think about the big arteries in your heart, like Woodward. So I have a private practice. We work in Bloomfield Hills, so I really understand Woodward, okay? Woodward is like this free-flowing 4-lane highway, right? And trust me, because I know, no matter what time of year it is, whether it's Dream Cruise or not, okay, no matter how well everybody is driving, okay, 5 o'clock rolls around and you know what I have outside my window? Traffic, right? Just like Woodward, our arteries have traffic in them, okay? But what's floating through our bloodstream? When you put food on your fork, right? And your body digests that food. We chew it up in our mouth. It goes down into our esophagus, sits into our belly, right? It gets broken down further. Where does that food go? That food goes into our intestines, and then quite literally, it's floating through our blood, right? So you know the concept, you are what you eat, right? That's what that means. What you put on your fork is the exact same thing that feeds every cell in your body and every organ that you have, right? So that's what I mean when I say traffic in your blood vessels, right? Even if we don't eat, we have red blood cells that are floating through there, right? We have food particles that are floating through there, basically sugars that are metabolized from that, right? Fats that we've eaten. Another word for fat is triglyceride or cholesterol, right? Our body is constantly taking things from our intestines to every cell in our body. So you can't read that, don't worry about it. The concept is that there's all sorts of things flowing through here, okay? And no matter how good of a behavior it is, whether it's snowing, whether it's raining, when you have traffic, you have accidents. Right? So what happens is your red blood cells go, or whatever goes, so it could be high blood pressure. So sometimes our body is always changing blood pressure, okay? When we stand up, our blood pressure goes up, right? So that we can actually make our blood go from our legs back up to our brain, right? And when that happens, sometimes we get a little bit of an injury on the sides of the walls, right? We'll go like this. Go with it. Okay, so when we have this injury, what happens? Inflammation, right? So inflammation says, whoa, 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 Woodward cannot go on. We cannot keep having free-flowing traffic. Go block that off, right? So cholesterol comes in and forms like these bumper pads on the top here. It says, we need to block this off here. There's some inflammation happening. Then calcium comes in and creates a nice, hard, candy-colored coating right here. So we have, this is called arterial injury. We have injury to our arteries. Then cholesterol comes in, walls it off. calcium comes in and makes a nice wall, right? So what just happened to Woodward? What happened to my 4-lane Woodward? We'll just use the top half. It got narrower, right? So that is how, so that is the concept of heart disease, actually, right? So we went from a 4-lane Woodward to a narrower 2-lane Woodward, okay? So now traffic is hitting this wall, right? Those are fancy words like atherosclerosis, okay, or coronary artery disease. The concept is the same thing. We get wall injury, okay, we get a narrowing of the wall, and it makes sense to you that when we're talking about our big arteries, like our aorta, and this process happens, we get a narrowing, right? But what about when this process happens to the tiny vessels in our fingers and our hands, right? In our heart, and for men, the penis in erectile tissue, etc., right? When there's a blockage, right? This is one of the ways it can lead to a heart attack. It's one of the ways that can lead to a stroke. And really just coronary artery disease or heart disease in general. Does anybody have any questions about this concept? Okay. So it makes sense to you that one of the first things we want to ask is, wait a second, how did this injury even happen, right? What can we do to lower inflammation, at least chronic inflammation, from happening in our vessels? Okay. That is how we can use food to affect what's happening in our arteries, right? So one of those things, oh shoot, I realized I don't have the ability to write anywhere. Okay, so the very first thing I tell people to lower how to lower inflammation in this way is to eat mostly whole foods, okay? So why does whole foods, first of all, what is a whole food? And what the heck does it have to do with your arteries, okay? So I want to back up for a second. I used to be a heart stent engineer. Okay, so when we had a narrowing of these arteries, what I used to do is I made the devices that would go in and kind of like, not roto-root, but the same concept, right? They would stick their way in and blow up like a balloon, right? To open back up those arteries, okay? So why I'm mentioning that is because when I'm particularly interested in it, but I was fascinated with how food can actually impact that, just like a medical device. Not necessarily in the same way, right? But food helps that narrowing, it prevents that narrowing from happening in the first place. Okay? So when we eat whole foods means that we're eating food that is grown and not changed very much, right? Like if you go to the grocery store today, we see so much food everywhere, right? And really it's packaged in very highly palatable, like I always think of Twinkies when I'm talking about this, right? Twinkies do not grow in the ground that way, right? Twinkies are made from wheat. They are ground up into a nice tiny flour, then they're bleached, they're colored, they're pressed, they're, you know, beautifully put in with the cream filling, right? None of that exists naturally in the world, right? So for our body to eat that, it's actually like, it's putting in something that breaks down very quickly. Okay, so if we looked at the way we eat, if we thought about your digestion and your metabolism like a fireplace, okay, if you want your fireplace to kind of burn low and slow, right? We all know, we've all heard things like you want a fast metabolism, we want to keep energy flowing. Food is energy, right? So if we want that fire, that energy to keep going, then what we want to do is we want to have something like a log in that fireplace, right? It's going to keep us warm. it's going to keep us having energy for a long period of time. Okay. The Twinkie is like taking a piece of firewood and grinding it up like flour, right, into very easily digestible food, right? So if you put sawdust, a ground log, into that fireplace, what's going to happen? It's going to go poof, right? So it's going to create this big explosion of energy, right? In the same way, when we eat foods that are processed, which is the majority of things in the grocery store, right? Unless it's whole fruits and vegetables, we are actually getting that pop of energy or sugar into our bloodstream, right? That's how we actually, that's why you keep hearing things like eat fruits and vegetables, eat different stuff like that, because our body knows how to break down fruits and vegetables in a different way than a Twinkie. Okay, even if the calories are exactly the same, okay, the actual vegetable comes with a buzzkill called fiber, right? So the Twinkie, it's like a toddler. I have toddlers, so it's very easy for me to relate to this, right? They like want to go. They're like, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, right? And fiber is like the thing that says, hey, slow down, calm down, right? And the toddler's like, oh no, you're taking forever to put my shoes on. You're doing so much. But when that food is slowed down by fiber, then the energy that we get from that food is much more even. Does this make sense to you guys? Yes, so I'm seeing some nods there, okay? So when we slow down how quickly food turns to energy or sugar in our bloodstream, right? We have less traffic in our arteries. Make sense? So it doesn't create a traffic jam. It doesn't create too much sugar too quickly, which can cause damage to those walls. Okay. So the number one thing, whether we're preventing diabetes, which is too much sugar in the blood, right? Whether we're preventing heart disease or cancer, is actually to first eat whole foods. Okay. So I already said to you guys that whole foods include fruits and vegetables. Okay. Is 2% milk a whole food? Type Y for yes and N for no. Is 2% milk a whole food? Y for yes, N for no. Okay, so this is a head scratcher. So it's not actually a whole food, because if I milked a cow, I wouldn't get 2% milk, right? I would get whole milk. And we actually have to process that milk to remove the fat from it to give it 50% fat or 2% fat. Does this make sense? Yeah. So is bread a whole food? This is a trick question. So no, yeah. So exactly, right? So bread doesn't grow in the ground that way, right? But am I telling you never to eat bread again? Not really, right? So the concept is we really can't eat wheat on its own, right? Like nobody's like chewing on a thing of wheat. We can sometimes eat wheat like grains like farro, etc., but we really can't eat wheat without a little bit of processing of it, right? So when I say whole foods, I mean mostly foods that are grown in the ground that way, or minimally processed foods. Okay. We've kind of all heard that white bread is bad for us, right? By now, most of us know that white bread is bad for us. But let's talk about the difference between a white bread and a whole bread, so you can understand what is a better choice for a whole grain. Okay. When we have wheat has this nice bran around it. Okay. And when we eat whole wheat bread, what they do is they stick the bran and the flour, the wheat inside together, and it gets ground up into a flour. Then it's rolled and it's made into this beautiful dough, right? And then it's baked. When we have white bread, the wheat bran is actually broken off, and what's left is ground there. But what is so beautiful about using the whole bran is that thing I said called fiber, okay? Fiber is the best buzzkill for your sugar high, right? So when we eat more whole foods or minimally processed, that means it doesn't maybe look exactly like how it grew in the ground, but it's got very little additives or binders to it. Like just because something says it's a whole grain bread, it doesn't necessarily mean it's better for us, right? So we want to look at the back and see how much fiber is in this bread, right? Because that's what you just learned. Eating whole foods with fiber help with maintaining sugar, etc. Right? But we also want to see what are the ingredients in this bread, right? So I really encourage my patients not to eat a lot of breads, etc., that don't have at least a couple grams of fiber in each slice. So we don't want to eat anything with under 2 grams of fiber unless you have a digestive issue where you can't digest fiber. Right? So you want to look at the back and really look at that. And then look at the ingredients. Is sugar in the first 3 or 4 ingredients of that label? Okay. Because if it is, that means that there's actually a pretty high sugar content that's added into that bread. And that's why it's so good. Right? Like that's what makes it so good. And usually it means it's been stripped of a lot of nutrients that a different whole grain bread would be. So brands that the next question I always get is like, what kind of brands do I like? So there's a brand called Ezekiel Bread, right? And I joke with everybody that it tastes like cardboard, right? And that's okay. And the reason it tastes like cardboard is because they have taken the actual seeds, the actual wheat, the actual spelt, right? Grind them up very little and make bread. So it's high in fiber. It's got a ton of nutrients in it, right? And the other one that I recommend, which isn't necessarily as good as the Ezekiel, but is widely available, is Dave's Killer Bread. So that you can get at Costco. You can get both at Costco. And so that is actually a nice way just to make a little bit of a swap to increasing your fiber, increasing the nutrients you're getting from bread or from grains like that, and still getting some bread. Okay. So we talked a little bit about milk and 2% milk, how that wasn't a whole food. We talked a little bit about bread, but what about vegetables, right? So the number 2 thing, whether we're talking about heart disease, whether we're talking about cancer, whether we're talking about diabetes, is to eat whole foods and is to eat a plate that is 50 to 70% vegetables. Okay. So I'm just going to level with you. You guys haven't made it this far without knowing that vegetables are good for you, right? No one's arguing that vegetables are good for you. But how do you know how much to eat? And do you really need to eat that much, right? So vegetables are, probably everybody keeps like a token vegetable. Like, I really want to draw. It was a brand called Dave's Killer Bread. Yes. So draw this plate here. Okay. So this is my plate. Okay. Most of us keep our vegetables in this top corner, right? It's like the classic plate divider, or maybe if you're really in the upper vegetable lovers, maybe you'll do a side salad, right? A lot of people are like, I eat a salad every day. That's what everybody tells me when they come see me. But what I tend to find is no matter what research you look at, right? When we want to balance your blood sugar, when we want to fight heart disease, when we want to fight cancer, the biggest bang that we get out of our plate is to fill 50% minimum, if not closer to 70, with fruits and vegetables. Okay. Why is that? It's because the types of vegetables we eat have different micronutrients in them. So I know I'm saying big words. Hang with me for a second, right? So why do we eat? We eat for energy. Okay. We eat because it gives us calories, right? Calories is just energy. But more importantly, each thing that we eat has a specific nutrient and vitamin in it, multiple, right? That we need in order for every cell in our body to grow well, right? We kind of don't think about it unless you're on a blood thinner, if you cut your finger, you just kind of, go, it hurts, right? But you're not thinking heal, heal, heal. Come on, do your thing. Platelets, all these things come together and heal my skin. It just happens on its own, right? The only way that's possible is because our body has the right nutrients, the right minerals, and the way that we get that is through the food that we eat, okay? I don't need to tell you that food today is not the same as food 50 years ago, right? The soil is different. We have much more of a fast-paced culture, right? We're not really tending to the soil as much as we should, which means that the vegetables, fruits, everything that we eat isn't quite as dense in nutrients because the soil isn't as dense in nutrients, right? So when we eat a plate of 50% vegetables, what we're actually doing is creating an insurance policy that we're getting enough nutrients to our bodies, okay? Nutrients help us because, back to the example of this, traffic, right? Nutrients help fix an injury right here before it becomes a cholesterol issue. Does that make sense? It's like, these are the concept of, I'm going to say a word most of you know, an antioxidant, okay? Antioxidants help fix vessel damage when it occurs. It helps cancer cells fix themselves as they occur. Okay, and that's pretty generalized. Yeah, what about taking multivitamins? Whole wheat non-bread today, does it have good fiber? I don't know, let's look at the label. Yeah, so multivitamins are what we call a supplement, right? And I always say this, so I am an expert in supplements and how they affect our health. And I say this to people, no matter what, I look them in the eye and I say, listen, there is no supplement in the world that can out-supplement a bad diet, right? There is nothing. There is nothing to do that. Don't get me wrong. I love supplements, and I think that they are, when useful for certain people, depending on their own blood work, what's going on in their body, right? But what we're doing when we're eating is actually we're voting with our body. When we eat broccoli, when we eat things like blueberries, when we eat brightly colored fruits and vegetables, because those are the ones that are highest in antioxidant, highest in repair potential for our body, right? We're voting, just like most of us are going to do in November, right? We're going to vote. We're going to say, this matters, this doesn't, right? So when we choose to eat vegetables, it's actually making deposits into our health savings bank, okay? It helps do things like balance our blood sugar, okay? It helps repair damage as it occurs in the cell walls, in anybody that's fighting cancer, etc. Okay? So we do that. So how do we know? It gets really old for like, eat more vegetables, eat more vegetables, eat more vegetables, right? So I tell people, I say, we're really trying to eat the rainbow. Okay, because what broccoli has, which is beneficial for preventing colon cancer, preventing breast cancer, has some effects in prostate cancer, has lots of effects in preventing heart disease, right? Also causes people gas, right? So I'm always parlaying that to see, did we get the nutrients out of something else if you don't like broccoli, right? And no, very few of my patients are eating broccoli every single day. Some are, and that's great, right? I wonder, how else can we get that? Maybe you like cauliflower and you don't like broccoli. So we get that stuff from the greens, the whites, right? The dark blues, purples. This is why you guys have heard, whenever I ask a question about antioxidants, everybody always chimes in about blueberries. So whoever did that public service announcement, thank you, right? So blueberries, those deep, rich colors, those like dark blues and purples, blackberries, dark cherries, all of those are really high in antioxidants and actually reverse some of the damage that's happening in our arteries, happening for cancer too, that's what creates cancer cells in the first place, damage, mutations, okay? So that's very powerful, right? So when you think about how every single minute that we're eating something, we, as a voting system, we get to tell our body what nutrients matters, what matters to us. If that doesn't give you massive excitement, I don't know what to tell you, right? That is so exciting because we get to have a say in what's going on with our bodies, right? So I talked a little bit about the blues and the greens. So what about, oh, I'm missing reds. So reds too. So these are the things like tomatoes. Vitamin C comes in kiwis, tomatoes, bell peppers, but there's also other nutrients in all of those things, right? So if anybody has specific questions about the nutrients, I'll take them now. But by building, when we're talking about a plate, and if we can just get into the habit, because that's what it is, right? It is a habit. When we go to the grocery store, we pick kind of the same stuff, right? We're like, oh, I'm going to get one thing of carrots, one thing of broccoli, one thing, I don't know. If you're like most of my patients, that's what most of us do. We kind of have a routine and we stick to it, right? But what I do with my patients is I sit down and I figure out what's going on for them. What's their health condition? What gives them gas? What makes them poop? You know, because all of those factors, of course, will influence what kind of vegetables, what kind of nutrients we put on that 50% of the plate. I see some of you are typing, and I'm just going to wait for those questions. It's really a bummer that I can't draw on this whiteboard because I love to draw and write. Maybe I'll just type it in here. Yeah, so somebody just asked me a question privately about, what are the benefits of broccoli? Yeah, so I just say broccoli because it's kind of a well-known super nutrient, right? Because of its massively well-studied effects, like preventing breast and prostate cancer, balancing a lot of the chemicals that can cause inflammation in our heart, etc. So that's why must we eat more vegetables than fruits? Excellent question, Denise. So yes, so the reason that we suggest eating more vegetables necessarily than fruits is that fruits do have sugar in them. So, fruits have been kind of put on the bad list lately because they do have sugar. And I don't want anybody listening to this to hear that fruits are bad for you. They're not. They're fantastic, right? But they do have an increased sugar content in them than vegetables, right? And sugar, remember, is another one of those things that creates traffic in our arteries, right? So we want to have balanced sugar. So we need sugar to live. We need sugar to pump our heart, pump our muscles, but we don't want too much too quickly, right? So eating more vegetables makes it so that we can have even energy, even blood sugar. Yes, what nutrients are missing for people who deal with constipation? Okay, Norma. So constipation is really individual to every person. So I work with a lot of women. I would say women, usually 50 plus, have some form of irritable bowel, like a lot of people do, right? So what I would do is I would have to sit down and figure out what's going on with your individual constipation, So for example, I sit down and I do a full history with you, right? I'll say, what makes you tick? How stressed are you? Do you drink water? Do you have a history of kidney stones? Have you had any surgeries that would affect your ability to have stools every day, right? And I would usually do a food analysis, like how much fiber are you eating right now? Do you hate fiber? Do you hate water? What's the problem, right? And then I would do labs to tell me, did I miss something? Do you actually have diabetes? Do you have a thyroid issue that could cause constipation? So it's not so much as easy as saying a general nutrient. It really is specific to you and what's going on. But in my experience with constipation, it's usually a combination of being a little stressed, not drinking enough water, right? And not getting enough fiber from our foods. So usually it's not so much a nutrient, like a specific vitamin, but some people do have what we call a magnesium deficiency. Okay. Magnesium is used in over 400 reactions in the body, and we get it from the soil, from plants. So if we're not eating enough plants, we could also have a magnesium deficiency and not be able to poop. So those are the most common reasons for poop or having irritable bowel, like I mentioned. Okay, so great question about how to prepare broccoli. So do we prepare broccoli? Is it the healthiest raw or steamed? Okay, so the quick answer is raw vegetables provide different nutrients for us. And when we steam them, we get different nutrients. The bottom line is, what can you tolerate, right? What are you going to eat? If I tell you raw broccoli is healthiest and you're going to eat raw broccoli, I am massively impressed, right? But for most of my patients, they either get gas by eating raw broccoli. So I say, eat it whatever way you want. Lightly steamed and not too mushy is best for enzymes, the enzymes it can give you. Actually, broccoli sprouts. So those are those, you know, when you, what do you call those? Those in the sandwiches, this is when you guys would all tell me the answer if I was, if you were unmuted. Like, can't recall. It's not bean sprouts, but you know what I'm saying? Those like sprouts in a sandwich.
Alfalfa sprouts?
Thank you, alfalfa sprouts. Just like that, Joe, we have something called broccoli sprouts, okay? They can be grown in a mason jar, depending on what's happened. If somebody is, for example, post-breast cancer, that's a lot of what I work on is how to increase some of these types of vegetables. A little bit of broccoli sprouts actually has many more nutrients than the actual broccoli itself, but it's very spicy. So if somebody likes spice, I will actually have them grow broccoli sprouts, lightly steamed, because that has the most nutrients. Alfalfa. Oh, everybody's telling me. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay, so I don't want to get too off track with my things. So remember, the first thing is eat whole foods, right? The second is eat mostly vegetables, 50% vegetables, and really 50 to 70. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't eat fruits, but it just means not eating 70% of your plate fruits, right? In the summer times, I oftentimes encourage eat what's in season. It's the best time to get fruit. It's the ripest, has the most nutrients in it, and man, is it good, right? So eating nutrients like that. And the third thing to prevent cancer, heart disease, and diabetes is eating a little bit less. Okay. So we are meant as human beings to have different intake in different seasons of life and also different seasons of the year, right? We didn't grow up, I know you and me did, but as a human race, we did not grow up having this kind of availability to food, right? So our body has these amazing adaptations that we can actually go a period of time without food, right? It always makes me laugh when I see those Snickers commercials. Have you seen those? Like where they're like hangry, grab a Snickers, right? We are so used to having food at certain intervals, right? Most of us get a little bit of a headache. We're really grumpy if we don't get food, right? So one thing I teach for longevity, so that means like living longer, for really not doing a diet per se, really making healthful changes that'll last, is you could either get a slightly smaller plate or do once a week, just do a planned eating less. This can look like something, I'm going to say some buzzwords, like intermittent fasting, right? So I do that with a lot of my patients if they're having trouble bringing down their sugar values. Okay, so because somebody asked, I want to talk a little bit about it. We have we have cells in our body that carry oxygen to every single tissue that we have. Those are called red blood cells. Most of you have seen them. Most of you have seen them in a blood draw that your doctor has done, right? When our red blood cells float through our bloodstream, here's that truck, okay? They're like little oxygen pickup trucks, right? When they float through our bloodstream, they attach themselves to sugar, okay? That sugar is an average measurement of sugar rather than if somebody had diabetes and they're checking their blood sugar right now. That's like, did you have a donut? Your blood sugar might be high. I don't care about that so much as I do the average of your blood sugar, right? That value is called hemoglobin A1c. Okay, so that's the average of your blood sugar over 60 to 90 days. That comes from the red blood cell because the flatbed of this truck is called hemoglobin. Does this make sense? So we have a red blood cell, carries oxygen to every single tissue. The flatbed of that truck is called hemoglobin. Okay. Red blood cell, flatbed, called hemoglobin. So now you guys are part-time doctors, right? So a hemoglobin A1c is that average sugar value. So somebody said, wait a second, I have a high hemoglobin A1c or an HbA1c, okay? If you get that tested by your doctor or with me or whoever, right? 5.7 to 6.4 means that someone is in the range of pre-diabetes. 6.5 or higher means that this is diabetes. So really, when we're in that sweet spot zone, when we're in 5.7 to 6.4, and people are having, there are a couple of things that work really well for diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, is to eat a little less, right? And by eating a little less, what we're actually doing is removing some of the energy supply or sugar that we're giving to our cells, okay? That is the concept of fasting or losing weight, right? When we lose weight, it actually changes a whole bunch of chemical reactions in our body, and it actually drops the available sugar that we have, okay? So if you want to work on triglycerides, A1c, any of that, I would suggest doing these three things. It is incredibly simple to do. It's not easy, right? Most of you guys know this. We know we should eat more vegetables. Maybe we don't know how. Maybe you have a family. Maybe you don't know which part of it is applicable to you, right? But so much of what I do is I individualize this care for patients or clients, whoever comes to see me, because it's not that simple, right? It is that simple, but it's not that easy, I should say, right? So depending on your blood work, so the person who had the high triglyceride, okay? Triglyceride, remember, did anybody remember what I said triglyceride is? Triglyceride is another word for fat. Let's talk about how we make fat. Does anybody know how we make fat? Thank you, Denise. Good job. Okay, too much energy. We make fat when we consume too much energy or too much food or too much sugar. Okay, so could we eat a ton of apples and get fat or make fat? Y for yes and for no? It would be really hard to eat that many apples, but we could. Yes, exactly, Christine. So yes, so it'd be really, really hard. So it's a bad example, but you could eat, it doesn't matter whether you're eating cubes of sugar necessarily, or if you're eating tons and tons and tons of pizza. If we consume more energy than our body needs, or calories, right? In the form of sugar, fat, etc., our body does a very good job storing it as fat. Okay, so to bring down triglycerides, okay, the first thing I'm going to do is emphasize whole foods, right? I'm going to emphasize eating a little less, and how we're going to eat a little less is individual to you, right? If you have, for example, history of disordered eating, fasting is not a good idea, right? Or if you're the type of person that gets horrible headache hangovers, I'm not the food police. I'm not going to make you do intermittent fasting, right? So maybe for you, we might do just a slightly lower plate and shift the focus. Maybe you're eating a little bit of broccoli, might double your broccoli, add in a couple carrots, right? So that you are not developing increased triglycerides too quickly, right? So whether we're talking about A1c or triglycerides or cholesterol, we are talking about the same mechanisms. Eating fiber will slow that down. Fiber actually pulls cholesterol and detoxes it from our system. That's what it's supposed to do. I'm talking, is losing weight the best way to bring down triglycerides raised by anostrozole? Perfect question. Okay, so this is a really advanced question, and I want to, Norma, I want to answer this for you, but I might have to answer this for you a little bit offline. Anostrozole is an estrogen blocking therapy. So when we as women go through menopause, we have lowered estrogen, right? For people who have breast cancer, there's a drug known as anostrozole that lowers their estrogen even further. Okay? As a result, oftentimes when we are in menopause, either chemically induced or otherwise, we tend to have changes in our metabolism, right? So we can look at that like, sometimes we see it as weight gain. In the blood, we see higher cholesterol, higher triglycerides, higher body fat. Yes. So the best way is for me to see how high are we talking with triglycerides. There's a lot of things we could do. For example, triglycerides, we talked about supplements, right? Specific supplements, for example, 4 to 5 grams of high quality fish oil. Okay, not the kind you get at Costco, right? High quality fish oil, 150 minutes of exercise in some form, specific type, those lower triglycerides and cholesterol. Okay, and different types of medications can lower triglycerides. So yes, weight loss helps, but I need to know, why do we have high triglycerides in the first place? Is it genetic? Is there a nutrient issue? Right? So that, I mean, obviously I can't figure that out. That's what I do in a session, right? But in general, there are a couple of basic things that we do, and 100%, Norma, I want you to do the 3 things that I said, which is switch over to, eating mostly like, at least somewhat eating more plants, right? Pair your meals so that you're actually getting the fiber, and you're going to see your triglycerides come down in 12 weeks. If not, we need to consider some drug management. Right? So that's how I approach things. Okay, perfect. So hopefully everybody else found some of that useful too, because I'm sure some of you are in menopause, right? Okay, can I touch on eating red meat versus non-red meat? Yeah, so I didn't finish actually my plate, right? So I did that 50%. Remember when I drew that plate, I did 50% vegetables. So what the heck goes on the other 50%? Right? So I actually say that meat, so I want everybody to make a fist with their hand, okay? That is the right amount of protein for you for your size. It's just an approximation, right? So in a meal, this is how much I tell you to eat, okay? So for example, for my cancer survivors, if somebody's already had a heart attack, if they've got a family history of heart attack or something like that, I'm really pushing for more of a plant-based diet, which means eating meat just more occasionally, right? Less, most people think that eating, swapping red meat for white meat is way better, like chicken, etc. And while that's true, if somebody's already had heart disease or cancer, I'm actually and their want to, right? I'm actually going to push for even more plants than that. So in the hierarchy, you'd be definitely get rid of red meat, right? Because it has all sorts of things. So people always ask me, what about grass fed? What about thing? It's like, it's not that you can't eat it, right? Like, I don't believe in saying no to anything. Like, that's not my philosophy around food. I think it just makes us want it more, right? But if you feel personally driven to be vegan, etc., I support it 100%, right? But I'll say, depending on where you are. So if you're somebody that's eating red meat 3 times a week and I tell you to go vegan, you're going to send me hate mail, right? So I'm not going to do that, right? But if you're asking what's ideally the best for my insides, it's way less meat. So eating meat, kind of like how some of you are very young on this call. So I'm going to say great grandparents ate, right? Meat was not something they ate every day. It was something that they ate maybe once a week, right? And yeah, that's my thought. So eating mostly vegetables, getting your proteins from different sources. And if you're going to eat meat, choosing meats that are, if you're a cancer survivor, doesn't have added hormones, etc., right? And I can talk about those different things. And eating meat. So if you've been somebody that's used to eating eggs and bacon every single day and your cholesterol is really high, we're going to work on reducing your red meat intake and your egg intake and seeing what happens to your cholesterol, if that makes sense to you. So it's individual. I also think that vilifying meat is not my game, right? So I have a lot of patients who are post-cancer treatment, don't pick up meat again, and I totally support that. I think that of course, if their blood markers show it, right? If their cholesterol is improving, if their sugar markers are improving, I'm all for it. It's great. And that's the same with dairy. So the reason dairy gets a bad rap is because, one, technically, I mean, think about it. We're drinking milk or we're drinking like a baby food substance from an animal, right? So it's going to have different growth hormones in it naturally. Even if it says like growth hormone free, it just means they don't inject the cow with growth hormone, okay? Baby cows need different things than you and me, right? So the definitive answer to dairy is, if you're going to eat dairy, I would prefer that it's a more whole food source, like and high protein source, like Greek yogurt, right? And some hard cheeses, and really limiting dairy beyond that, right? So I would swap over somebody's cow's milk if they're eating it every day in cereal. I would consider some other plant milk because they really are, in my opinion, better for you, particularly if you've had heart disease, cancer, have a high risk of high cholesterol, etc. Right? So half and half, for example, raises a lot of my patients' cholesterol. And some people, I want you guys to know, so a lot of people will argue with me and I love it, right? So I love when my patients say, Dr. March, I love you, but I cannot give up my half and half. I'm like, great. Knowing what you're about and what you're willing to give up, right, makes it so that we can create whatever food plan, whatever supplement plan will let you keep the half and half and still get your health goals, right? Because ultimately what we want to do is bring those triglycerides down. Ultimately, what we want to do is strive for that heart health, right? And if all of those numbers look good, your inflammatory numbers look good, because I run markers for inflammation, right? I'm cool with what you eat. I'm good with personalizing it, because there's 20 people on this call, okay? If I gave you all the exact same meal, right? Every single one of you would have different blood sugar responses, different cholesterol responses. So it really has to be individualized to the person. Is there anybody else? I think I missed a question too. Yes. What are the best protein sources if one doesn't eat meat? And that's an excellent question. Okay. So first of all, there's protein in a lot of things. So one of the first things I do, Anne, is to figure out what are your individual protein needs, right? So sometimes I have people do like an online diet diary or whatever, so I can see exactly what they're eating, right? And the other piece is, we first need to determine, how old are you? How, are you, for example, losing weight? Not that anybody on this call might be doing that, but is currently fighting cancer and needs extra protein for any reason. Do you have osteoporosis? Like, all of those questions matter for me answering where to get your protein source, right? So if you are, average for your age, etc., and we determine your protein, usually what we'll do is we'll sit down and figure out how much protein, or what's your gap. Maybe it's 20 grams, maybe it's 40 grams, right? And depending on that, depending on if you like it, I might give you a protein shake. Like Orgain is one I use very frequently. Okay, you can get that at Costco. It's made by an MD that's a cancer survivor. Some of my patients like it, some of my patients hate it, right? So if you like smoothies, I'll use a quick 20-gram protein shake to boost up your protein. That protein is usually made out of pea protein. And if you have a sensitivity, we work on something else, right? Other sources are things like lentils and beans. So I don't know if you grew up hearing this song. I did. Beans, beans, good for your heart, but they make you fart, right? I love it because beans are truly cardioprotective. Okay, they're excellent for longevity. If you look at anybody who lives for a long time in anywhere in the world, these clusters of people that live into their 90s, well over into their 90s, sorry, they eat beans, lentils very frequently. Okay, so any kind of bean is fine. So black bean, pinto bean, white bean, kidney bean, I don't care, right? And the other answer is things like lentils. Okay, so there's a lot of Mediterranean restaurants around here, right? That crushed lentil soup, a cup of that is actually 18 grams of protein, a cup of cooked lentils. So that's quite a bit of protein. Okay, for the people who love dairy, I switch over to Greek yogurt. It's much higher in protein. And if people do totally fine, then I might give them something like cottage cheese. It just depends. But those are my biggest sources. For some of my breast cancer survivors or people who are more plant-based, I might lean them to things like edamame, which is the whole soybean, or very minimally processed tofu, right? So I lean less towards processed meats like the Beyond Meat and all that. I say use it on occasion, use it sparingly, because now it's everywhere. My husband told me he saw it at Burger King. It's like, what? That's crazy. Or somewhere like that. I don't know. Right? So that's really amazing that it's out there and it's a good option to have when you're out on the road. But I stick to mostly things like a little bit of dairy if it's there, fish sources if we're doing fish, tofu, and I forgot what I said. Oh, lentils and beans. Okay. Things like quinoa have really high amount of protein for the amount that they give or the amount of food that they are. A lot of attention with nutrition advice focuses on avoiding high blood pressure. Do you have any recommendations for helping with low blood pressure? Yes, with somebody that has a heart murmur. Yeah, so this is great question. And it's exactly what I'm saying about the individualization piece, right? So if we're talking about, a lot of us have heard don't salt your food if you have high blood pressure, et cetera. Low blood pressure is a completely different mechanism. And it can actually, the root cause of it may be something totally different. So for somebody with low blood pressure, depending on what the reason was, if I might say actually salt your food, I would put you on electrolytes to help boost up that blood pressure. And I'd want to know more about why before making nutrition recommendations. Yes, like a heart murmur. Yeah, okay. So you would need different types of electrolytes. You would need to take care of yourself in a different way, not just food. Yeah. Okay, so that was really, I didn't get too much into fasting because I didn't want to scare you. And I didn't want you to feel like if you have to fast to get there, but there's lots of different ways you can eat a little less. Like back in the day, I don't know how familiar you guys are with this, but a lot of people would do during like Lenten season or other religious holidays. So Muslim culture oftentimes fasts for a whole month in Ramadan. I'm Indian, so I understand Hindu culture very well. They fast for all sorts of different religious holidays, avoid meat, avoid different things at different times. Catholics, like I said, in Lenten season, tend to not eat meats on certain days, right? And this is seen all throughout history. So one of the things that I suggest that can be helpful is to fast on a single day of the week. If you're capable, if you're able, please obviously check with your doctor or come see me and I'll help you. But it's not right necessarily for everybody. So you can sometimes just eat a little less by not grazing all day. Hands up if you're a grazer. You kind of eat when you feel like it. Anytime you pass something in the fridge, you put it in your mouth, right? So for some people, just cutting out snacks like that can help them just eat a little less in general. And I want you to know that eating a little less is not just about weight, actually. It helps. Remember, I told you that we're not supposed to have this much food, or not supposed to, but our bodies aren't adapted to have this much food all the time, right? When we fast in small ways, like whether it's overnight, right? So sometimes I have people just do 12 hours overnight. So stop eating at 7 o'clock and you don't eat breakfast again till 7. That's called a 12-hour time restricted eat. When we do that, it actually wakes up our body's own housekeeping, right? Wouldn't that be nice if we went to bed and our houses got cleaned? Like, I don't have a Roomba, but I assume that that's what those electronic robots are like, right? You go to bed, you wake up with a slightly cleaner house. We actually have that as a mechanism in our bodies. When we stop eating for longer periods of time, it wakes up our body's housekeeping mechanisms. And that is extremely, extremely cool, right? So these are the things that these untapped secrets to our own body that we could be using just by making some minor tweaks. Norma's question is it okay to eat between noon and 7 p.m. only every day? Yeah. So remember when I said the words intermittent fasting, right? Intermittent fasting can be a tool for people who, one, tend to eat late at night if they keep going, right? How many of you are popcorn lovers? That's what a lot of my patients say. They have chips or popcorn late at night, right? So when we set that time restriction of noon to 7, that is what we call an eating window. Okay, so stay with me. It's getting technical. You guys pop your questions if you have more questions. When our eating window is between 12 and 7, that means we have a 7-hour eating window, right? So we have, 17 hours that we're not eating. And that is the time that it allows our body to wake up and do housekeeping. Okay, so that's a little bit more of an advanced concept, Norma, and 100%. So it can be effective in lowering someone's triglycerides, blood sugar, etc. A lot of my patients find that it helps with weight control because it's like in our minds, right? It's like, well, I can't eat after 7. And having that hard and fast rule is helpful for some people. I don't remember who it was that asked, what can I do to get, oh yeah, they loved eating carbs. Thank you for reminding me about that question. So when we like eating carbs, food in general for us, right? Carbs, so carbohydrates, things like sugars, breads, chips, pastas, all of those are carbohydrates. One of the reasons they feel so good is because they're actually engineered to be like that sawdust model, right? So when we eat sawdust, like, I don't mean sawdust, but when we eat things like breads, chips, etc., it's salty, it makes fast energy, right? And in our brains, it's actually very similar to cocaine. It's like, boo! So our brain is like, give me more of that. I don't feel good. I'm sad. I'm depressed. Where's the ice cream? Where are the chips? Right? So you have to pick whether you're a salty or a sweet kind of person. But for most of us, it's actually a chemical habit and a chemical reaction. It's very much like having an addiction, like a gambling addiction or anything else. So how we approach it is consciously, right? That's how we do anything as people and as humans. The question is, I don't have a magic wand. I can't make you not want bread, right? But by choosing breads that are different, by using meal timings differently, right? Are you eating a lot of carbs because you're running out in the morning thinking you're intermittent fasting, and by the end of the day, maybe you're getting off work, etc., you want to shove everything in your face, right? Maybe intermittent fasting isn't right for you. Maybe you're craving carbs because it's actually due to reactionary hunger, right? So for you, what I would do is I would say, start your meal with the protein, right? So if we're doing lentils, we'd start with the lentil soup. If we're doing chicken, we'd start with a fistful of chicken first, because that actually signals to your brain, slow down, stop eating, etc. Or like, you don't need to eat quite as much, right? And you and me would make a plan on how many carbs would be appropriate, right? So we would say, let's try, if you're used to eating 4 bowls of chips, okay? I would ask you, like, is that something you want to do? And most people look at me like, no, that's why I'm here. I'm like, okay, but I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be taking the bowl away from you, right? So you have to do this in baby steps. And some people are not baby step kind of people. They're like, to heck with the chips, right? So I say, okay. And what I usually suggest is weaning off of that. So saying, if you're starting at 4 bowls of chips or 4 handfuls of popcorn, and you don't want to do that because it makes you feel lousy and your triglycerides are high, we'll say, okay, for the next 3 weeks, we're committing to 3 cups of popcorn, for example, right? The difference is, a lot of people try a lot of stuff on their own, but we have such an emotional connection and an addiction to food. It's very difficult to sustain if we aren't kind of coached through it using some different techniques, right? So I can't help. I totally get your love of carbs. We'll probably have some form of a love of carbs forever, but I'm very good at helping people get off bread if they really want to. If they want to make different choices, we might swap things like sweet potato or, get, like I said, use the protein first trick, and that usually really helps. Okay, so I want to do a summary. I want to explain, type in any last questions, because like I said, I promised I wouldn't keep you here till 9. I want to just kind of summarize what I said so that you really get it, okay? The first thing is that nutrition, supplements, they have to be individual to you, right? Because every single one of you has a different body, right? You have a different way you react to different foods, okay? So remember, we're going to eat whole foods, so things that are grown in the ground or look very similar to that. We're mostly going to choose vegetables and fruits for 50% of our plate. That top 25% is going to be the protein, meats, whatever we want. And the bottom half is going to be whole grains, right? That bottom 25%. And we're going to eat a little less if it's appropriate for us. So that is the overall summary of how to fight cancer, heart disease, and diabetes with your fork. Okay. Thank you very much for hanging out with me. I want to tell you how to get a hold of me. So this is my website. It's my first and last name. It's shrutimarch.com/march forward. We do a ton of speaking. So if you want to join my list, I send out a weekly email most weeks, right? It's tips on how to kind of work your head into the food game, right? How do we get over stuff like this? So click on that link. It'll just ask you for your email. So what it means to march forward. So I just want to talk about my personal beliefs on this for 1 second. I think you wouldn't know this looking at me, but I was actually at different points in my life 50 pounds heavier than I am today. And the reason that I do this work is because there really is such a profound effect that we get to have every time we sit at the dining table or not, right? Every time we put food on the fork, we get to either fight disease or feed it, right? And that is an unbelievable place to sit. So thank you for spending all this time with me that you have. I want to tell you that you guys have lots of things that we can do, most likely, right? If you need any help, you can go to that email. My website is called AIM Natural. That's where my practice is located. And our number is 248-798-2942. And otherwise, you can get on my email list and you can keep in touch with me in that way. Okay, so I'll stay on here for a couple of minutes if you guys want to unmute and ask some questions, etc. Otherwise, I hope you guys have an absolutely fantastic night.